And stress actually has really clear components. Our brain only mounts a stress response if something is both demanding and unpleasant and uncontrollable. So if you as a leader can make situations feel more manageable, more meaningful even, then you've got a recipe for helping people manage their stress and therefore think more clearly.
Welcome to the Seismic Shift podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Michelle Johnston. And as you all know, this is the podcast where we explore the seismic shifts that are shaking up the way that we work and the way that we live. I want to thank Loyola for their incredible sponsorship of this podcast. And thank you to the listeners for making it a top 10% global podcast. You all are going to be so excited. We have an unbelievable powerhouse in the studio with us right now, and her name is Caroline Webb. Hey, Caroline.
Hi, Michelle. Glad to be here.
I really want to dive in she has a new book coming out called Leadership Intelligence. And let me just give you, I'm going to give her the floor. This book is going to be freaking amazing because of her depth of experience in the field of leadership. She's just been named a top 50 executive coach by Thinkers 50. And this is the first year that they're going after not just the top thinkers in the world, but the top coaches in the world. And Caroline Webb has been identified as one of the top coaches in the world. She also was identified by Inc. magazine as one of the top 50 leadership and management experts. She's a frequent contributor to Harvard Business Review, and she used to work for McKinsey and led the entire leadership practice. Am I right when I say we've got a powerhouse in the house, right? Welcome again, Caroline Webb. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
All right. So we're going to begin with what seismic shifts are you seeing, girlfriend? What is happening from your vantage point on the Upper West Side?
Well, it's hard to talk about seismic shifts right now without mentioning AI, at least in passing, isn't it? I do see that alongside the AI transformations that everybody is wrestling with and embracing, there's another shift, which is leaders realizing that actually to get the most out of their human talent, to make the most of human intelligence, they need to raise their game in how much they understand how the human brain works. In other words, to lead humans well, you need to understand how the human mind works. And I'm seeing more and more interest in, well, how do we develop better critical thinking? What does it take to really motivate people through this incredible period of change? And how do we think about sustaining people's resilience through all the ups and downs? So I do see this twin track of people wanting to raise their game as human leaders, not just as leaders who are implementing big AI transformations.
Well, wow, you are preaching to the choir right there. I spend so much of my time working with leaders on how to show up human and really trying to get their attention on what you've done in the past isn't necessarily going to be effective anymore because we don't have these organic opportunities like we've had in the past for true meaningful connection. We're so addicted to technology, and AI is going to make it better and worse, that we just are not connecting at a human level. So when you say yes, and leaders need to figure out how to show up with these new skills of how to be human, what does that mean to you?
Well, it won't surprise you to know that I have a framework in the book that I call the Leadership Intelligence System. And it's about making the most of human strengths in an era of AI. If you think about what humans are uniquely good at, it's figuring out what the right thing to do is when there isn't really a right answer at all. So I call that wisdom, and I call the habits of deliberate wisdom the skills that you use to actually bring the best out of yourself in terms of great choices and smart decisions. And that's yourself as a leader, but it's also the environment you create as a team for your colleagues to do their best quality thinking. It's about the ability to inspire people to figure out what's going to really light them up. And this is where you and I really, we're absolutely in sync, because the research on the brain's reward system says that if you look at what's most sustainable and what's most lasting as sources of motivation, it's a sense of personal competence and it's a sense of social connection. And leaders need to be really, I think, deliberate and forensic about, okay, well, what do I do then to boost people's sense of competence and connection to keep them motivated and moving through this period of change? And then with resilience, that's the third pillar of my book. That's what I call reasoned resilience, because you're thinking about what it is that actually really builds resilience rather than just telling people to man up and grit their teeth. And stress actually has really clear components. Our brain only mounts a stress response if something is both demanding and unpleasant and uncontrollable. So if you as a leader can make situations feel more manageable, more meaningful even, then you've got a recipe for helping people manage their stress and therefore think more clearly. So that's the system. That's what I'm teaching my clients. That's what I'm talking to any leader who will listen about, this sort of system of how you get the best out of the human minds that are around you.
So that's your leadership intelligence system that you are writing about right now in the book. And I think it's going to be published in September, correct?
That's right. Early September. Back to school.
Back to school. Oh, that is a good time. And then people can pre-order when?
They can pre-order right now. It's
beautiful.
going to be available on all usual favorite booksellers. So, whether that's Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Books A Million or bookshop.org, you name it, it'll be there. So thanks in advance if this piques your interest.
Absolutely. And it will definitely, because so many of my listeners are used to me talking about, we have to show up with our humanity as leaders. We have to see others as human. What does that mean? We've got to go deeper with connection because we're just losing those organic opportunities. So one of the things you just said, one of your pillars was about stress. And could you go into that more? I had not heard it framed like you said, is if leaders can manage situations for people so that they don't feel. Can you go over those three things? Because that was cool.
It's pretty interesting. If you think about your own life, you think about demanding, challenging situations, they're not always awful and stressful. They don't always generate a stress response in your brain, what I call a defensive mode response, where your vision narrows and your heartbeat races and you can't think as clearly. Sometimes demanding situations actually are enjoyable and exciting and engaging. And it's because stress doesn't come from just something being demanding. It also comes from things being unmanageable, uncontrollable, feeling of not being in control. And also a feeling of it being unpleasant. Because if you think about it, if you had a situation that was demanding and unpleasant, but you could walk away, I mean, it's not that stressful. If you have a situation that's demanding and, you can, yes, okay, you can't walk away, but it's not that big a deal. It's not that difficult or unpleasant. Then that's also no big deal. So it's actually the combination that creates a stress response in people. So you can be really precise about this as a leader. You can say, okay, this is going to be a lot less stressful if I can make this feel more manageable, for example, by amplifying what's certain in the situation, things we know for sure, even if there's a lot that's unknown, things that we are as a team, our values and our history and our traditions and so on, the things that we control. Sometimes there are some things that we can choose and control even when there's chaos around us. So you can be really precise about how to reduce people's stress in the face of challenging situations. And it's really easy to learn and it's really easy to put into practice. And this if you're in a stressful situation, you say, okay, hold on, what do I know for sure? And you write those things down. It makes you immediately feel better. And that's the same, if you're leading your team.
Oh, I love it. So much of connection for me, my research is, as a matter of fact, I was just leading an offsite yesterday for a big leadership team. And we were talking about Patrick Lencioni's framework of the 5 dysfunctions of teams. And according to his research, he says the foundation is trust. And so I was talking to the executive team saying, and my research shows that you can't just trust people. It doesn't start with just trust. You don't, as a human, automatically, I completely trust you and I know nothing about you. It starts with connection. Right. And you have to embed time to truly understand, ask questions, hear about the other person's journey, their story. Who are they? Why are they doing what they do? And go deeper. And then once you establish that connection, then there's an opportunity for you to trust them. So I would love the listeners to get to know your story, Caroline Webb. So I know about it, but the listeners don't. So tell us your story.
Well, my story is almost always all the way through about maximizing human potential. And I'm starting from maybe 16. I was very interested, as I guess a lot of kids are, in science fiction, and I fully intended to go and work at NASA as an astrophysicist. And then I took economics as a class and realized, oh, you can be rigorous and structured in thinking about human stuff. And that was it. I mean, I was an economist. That set me on the track to being an economist, and that was how I focused on human, potential and performance for the first chunk of my career. But the further I went on into economics, the more technical it got. I've got I love math, but it got further and further from the sense of this being a human science. So I went to McKinsey to focus on leadership and organizational change. Certainly one of the more unusual paths to go from something very technical to go to something less technical at McKinsey. But that's what I went there for. And I had a wonderful time. I stayed there for 12 years. I was one of the co-founders of the leadership practice. Didn't do it single-handedly, and had a fantastic time working on leadership teams and leadership team effectiveness and leadership development programs. But all the time I was using behavioral science as a foundation, because I found that leaders were so much more willing to try something new. Maybe, try not shouting, or try, giving feedback in a different way, if there was some logic behind it, if there was some sense of, oh, no, actually, this is how the brain works, and this is why this is going to work better. And you're not alone in feeling this way. This is because your brain works in this particular way. So behavioral science came back into my life, and ended up being woven through the work I did on leadership development, leadership coaching. And eventually I flew the nest from McKinsey in 2012 and set up on my own, and started writing my first book, How to Have a Good Day. And really now I see myself as a leadership coach, and sometimes I'm coaching by working directly with people, and sometimes I'm coaching by writing and hopefully reaching a much larger audience, and sometimes I'm coaching by having wonderful conversations with wonderful people like you.
Oh, that is beautiful. That was going to be what I was curious. What prompted you to leave McKinsey?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I loved my time there. I was there for 12 years, and I'm still a senior advisor on leadership topics. I was ready for that mix of a portfolio of coaching and speaking and writing. And, I managed to get that off the ground well before I left McKinsey. A lot of people would say, oh, I went from being a consultant to being a coach. But actually, I got certified as a coach back in 2004. And I was doing coaching work actually while I was a partner at McKinsey. But yeah, there came a point where I wanted that freedom to have a portfolio that had a bunch of different things in it. And it's worked out beautifully. In a way, I've had the best of all worlds, because I'm still an advisor at arm's length, but I get to choose the mix that I want from day to day.
That is just beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And tell us more about the first book, because I've really gotten to know your work in the past couple of years through our affiliation with 100 Coaches. Tell me about How to Have a Good Day.
Well, that sprung from this work that I was doing with leaders, leadership development programs, and so on. And they would say, well, is there a book that does what you do? I would say, well, there's Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. There's Predictably Irrational by Dan Ariely. All behavioral scientists are called Dan, apparently, apart from me. And so I found myself, recommending these books, and they would say, well, no, but the practical stuff where you translate the science into practice, the practical things that you do with us. And so I thought, oh, okay, there could be a need. There could be a need for a book that translates science into practice and does it in a really accessible way. I think it would have been hard for me to feel that it was worth writing such a big book if I didn't feel like there was a need. And it worked out beautifully. You can't ever know for sure whether a book is going to be successful, because so many amazing books don't get the audience that they deserve. But it really has worked out. And in a way, there's a real parallel between that and leadership intelligence, because both are saying, okay, here are 21 really common situations. How would you ace them if you knew a bit about the science of how you think, feel, and behave? And that was How to Have a Good Day. And leadership intelligence is 21 everyday leadership situations that every leader at some point will run into. So there's a little parallel between the two.
How did you come up with 21?
Well, there's some magic about 21, isn't there? You know, I think the John Maxwell leadership books first put 21 in our consciousness. You know, honestly, for How to Have a Good Day, it was a bit of an accident. It felt right. I mean, I chose the topics, to be clear, you know, because they were the right topics. I think with leadership intelligence, I really like symmetry. I really like it to be super easy for someone to pick up what I write and use it right now. Yes, I would love them to sit and read, you know, by the fire with, you know, a highlighter and a Post-it note, and go deep. But I really want my work always to be super usable. So, you know, you're going into a meeting that's going to be a bit tense. Oh, okay, I want you to be able to turn to, right, that's chapter 5, how to mentally prepare for an important meeting. I want you to be able to find it very easily. And I find symmetry is helpful for my readers on that. So there's 7 chapters on wisdom, 7 chapters on inspiration, 7 chapters on resilience, all kind of situations that have come up again and again and again with the people I've coached over the years. Over 25
fantastic.
years. A long time.
Wisdom, inspiration, and resilience. Those are the 3 pillars in leadership intelligence. Can you share a vivid story for each one of them? Can you pull a story from the book so that our listeners can walk away like, okay, I've got a good little case study on wisdom, inspiration, and resilience?
Oh, you bet. So one of the chapters in the wisdom part of the book, it won't surprise you, is decision making, because you think about leaders making decisions every day, and not just the big ones, but the small ones. How do I respond to this, slightly challenging email from a client? You know, how do I deal with the fact that there might be, you know, an issue in the team, morale might be sliding? What do I do to really make good choices? And so the challenge for leaders is that you don't really have, you have the same brain as everybody else. And that means that you tend to only see options and only see information that resonates with what you're already thinking. So that means you miss a ton. And so a lot of what helps leaders make better decisions and better choices is to widen their perspective very deliberately and to be structured in stepping through the options. And I've got a model called the ACORN model, which is aim, criteria, options, rating, and next steps. And if you go through those, I can guarantee you're going to make a better it's not just me that guarantees it. Research tells us that you're going to make a better decision. The story is that I used it yesterday for myself. I was trying to decide, should I take on this new piece of work or should I not? And I was very focused on, is it a yes or no decision? I was answering the wrong question. I needed to go back to the beginning and say, okay, what's the aim of actually making this decision? And I was very focused on, it's making a yes or no choice. That wasn't the aim. The aim was, what kind of portfolio do I want for my work in the next couple of months? That was the bigger question. Zooming out, seeing the bigger picture and starting with the aim. And as a result of that, I saw different options. One of the options was actually not yet, not just yes or no. So that was what I ended up doing. I said not yet to this particular opportunity. So I'm using my own tools again and again myself every single day.
Great example. I love it. And I love that it was you just yesterday trying to figure out, and you just needed to shift your perspective, which is actually the first chapter in Marshall and I's book, Shift Your Perspective, right?
Absolutely.
We're saying, because our book is focused on better connection for better results. And we're saying that in order to show up human as leaders today and show up with full humanity, we've got to switch our perspective from the what to who. Who do I get to interact with? Who do I get to inspire and influence and motivate today? And that switch to who is what's going to make us human and our employees feel human.
Absolutely. And it's so easy, excuse me. It's so easy to focus on what's right in front of you and miss the whole of the bigger picture, which in your case, you so beautifully talk about the web of relationships that we all sit in. And we're not always thinking about the importance of those relationships and acting in a way that preserves them and builds them.
That's beautiful. Okay, so that's your first big couple of chapters on wisdom, right? And that was your example. What about inspiration?
Well, inspiration. So this is about understanding that if you tap into the brain's reward system, you're going to unlock so much more motivation, engagement, excitement in the people that work with you. And that is about competence and connection. Now, I'm sure people who listen to your podcast have gone really deep into connection. So maybe I'll say a little thing about the competence side of things. One of the ways that we can, when we're facing a challenge, we can tap into the importance of competence is in thinking about how we use our strengths. And this is not a new idea. I think Gallup has done seminal research over decades showing that when leaders are really thoughtful about, okay, well, what is this person's strengths and how do I play to it more fully, then everybody's performance increases, and you see that flow through into financial results, not just in the individual's performance and motivation. But I think still, I don't see leaders think about when their folks are tackling something new, which everybody is right now, how do you get them to play with their existing strengths? So, as people are starting to use AI tools, okay, everybody's got different strengths. Maybe someone is very good at tapping into what other people think and feel. Maybe they're a Michelle. They're excellent at, figuring out where someone else is going. And Michelle has a big board presentation, and it's a whole new situation for her to move into that level of exposure. And if you're a smart leader, you say, okay, Michelle, you're really good at thinking about where everybody's coming from. What if you were to sit with your favorite AI tool and work on doing a little analysis of every single person around the board table? Think about where are they coming from? What are their needs? You're really good at that. That's a strength of yours. Apply it here, and then you'll be able to step up to your best possible performance when you're doing something that's otherwise pretty unfamiliar and scary. So I think that's something which I've seen recently, and I loved how the leader did that.
Oh, that's beautiful. So competence and connection. And again, at the end of the day, people want to feel valued. They want to know that what they're doing is making a valuable contribution, that they're doing it well, they're in a right place in the organization to make an impact, to make a difference. And then they need, just like we need food and water, we need connection. So what are you telling people on the connection side of that equation of the pairing of competence and connection? What are you telling leaders to do in particular?
Well, I'm telling them to pay a lot of attention to the things that you talk about in building a sense of togetherness in the team. The importance of really understanding who your colleagues are as people. There's a little exercise I do, which is past, present, future, where I encourage a leader, and leaders can do this without a facilitator in the room, to say, okay, let's hear one thing that went well for you in the past, one thing that's going well for you now, and one thing you're looking forward to in the future. And you can obviously ask questions like, what was hard for you in the past? What's hard for you right now? And what are you nervous about in the future? And if you're systematic about doing that across your team, maybe it's a longer monthly or quarterly meeting, you have this sense of, oh, these are all real human people. these are fully rounded, delightful human beings. And that's how you build a sense of trust and connection. So I do a lot of work encouraging leaders not to skimp on that, because I think sometimes they feel, oh, do I really need to do this? Does it really make that much difference? There was one CEO I was suggesting do this exercise for honestly years. And then he finally did it, and he said, oh my God, it's the single best thing I ever did with my team. I was like, okay, well, I need to work on my persuasion skills. Yeah, but we got there.
I get that a lot. My leaders and I coach, we're like, yeah. And then I'll do a little pulse check with the people, and they'll say, gosh, I wish that this leader would begin with some sort of connection in our meetings. And I'm like, wait, What? They don't? Are you kidding me? Because, it's such a surprise. Because,
Yeah.
any high level, high performing leader tends to see the agenda and they just go right into the agenda. Right. Exactly.
Right.
And they think, we already did an offsite this year. So we really got to know each other. I don't need to begin every meeting with connection, but I strongly believe that you do.
Yeah.
Again,
100%.
because these organic moments of connection are just not happening as much. That's why it's because our world of work has changed, and most meetings are now virtual, and most leaders don't embed connection in virtuals. And so when we don't have the coffee moments, we don't have the water cooler moments, we don't have the restroom moments where you're washing your hand like Caroline.
Absolutely.
What are you doing for Easter? We don't have all those moments, and so you really have to intentionally embed it.
Yes.
So your last pillar bucket is on resilience. Share with you a story that really highlights that.
Well, I think any situation that we're wrestling with in a team somehow feels better when you feel like you're pulling together around it to make progress. And that's the point about connection being such an intrinsic reward for the brain, and it helps to tamp down the part of stress which is about unpleasantness. If you can help people feel that there's something socially meaningful about something they're wrestling with, there's a leader I think is absolutely terrific at doing this, and she's actually the role model for this chapter in the book. Her name is Gail Tate. And she was working at a company where she had a lot of incoming T-shirts one day. And you might say, okay, well, what's the problem with that? So she was in the business of re-commerce, which is taking returns from businesses and figuring out how to get them back out into the world rather than into landfill. And she understood that it was absolutely critical that when something went wrong, that she pulled the team together, and that was the first thing that she did. And what was going on was that they suddenly had, I think it was hundreds of thousands of T-shirts. Something had gone wrong with the forecasting. Something had gone wrong in the system somewhere. They did not have space for, let's call it 500,000 T-shirts incoming. And that was a crisis that she led them through with a sense of connection at the heart of it. And she, got them together to do the problem solving. She used the structured acorn model to walk everybody through it together. She held blame back and did not focus on that. Not to say there wasn't accountability later, but really a sense of being, we're going to solve this together. And that's what I see again and again in leaders who cope with difficult situations, is actually pulling that lever of togetherness. How are we going to do this? What is our, what can we draw on here? What do we know about this? It's inspiring whenever I see one of my clients do it, and it works every time to create that sense of togetherness.
Oh, I love that. You know what I saw recently? One of my leaders held his big system leadership meeting with thousands of people, and they had Hoda Kotb on, and Hoda Kotb was one of the best speakers I have seen. It was magnetic. She was magnetic. I mean, it was kind of like we were all levitating. I'm not kidding, Caroline. It was just, of course, I was on the front row, so I was like, oh my God, I could feel her energy. And after that, they had a fireside chat. And then after that, my leader brought two of his big executive new hires on stage. And rather than telling his executives, okay, talk about strategic goals, talk about plans, what's your vision for the future, he literally had them sit down and they had a discussion about who they are as a father, as a husband. They were both guys. Pictures, the only pictures they showed were not PowerPoint with 3 bullets. It was a picture of them and their family, what they love the most about their family, what their hobbies are, their pets, when they've ever dressed up, pictures of them in costume. And it was just showing them, here are 2 new hires, high-level hires. You're going to see their name in all these emails. I want you to know them as humans. And I thought that was a beautiful demonstration of what you and I are talking about. It's a switch, and it's kind of, it can be, what is it called? Whiplash, because old meetings, even 5 years ago, executives would not have done this at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, leaders do need to be deliberate about finding these moments of human connection. And, I'm here to complement the work that you do in talking about this is a really direct way of firing up a brain's reward system. And the reward system is the engine of human motivation. So this is not just something that feels good in the workplace. It is crucial for people to feel excited, motivated, energized, ready for what comes next. It makes a material difference to the level of intelligence people are able to bring to their work.
Oh, speaking of which, that is exactly what we hope that you all will do, is buy Caroline Webb's new book, Leadership Intelligence. It is absolutely, and look, I've only read the summary. I cannot wait to get my hands on it because I love the idea of the framework. I love the idea of Acorn. I love the idea of of just human intelligence and how we can tap into that to elevate all of our leadership skills. I can't thank you enough, Caroline, for coming on the show of the Seismic Shift podcast. And if you could leave our listeners with just 2 or 3 pieces of advice as they're driving their cars that can elevate them today, I would love that.
Sure. I mean, let me give you one for each of the 3 pillars: wisdom, inspiration, resilience. So, if you're a leader and you're trying to make your team as intelligent as possible, draw out their collective intelligence, you want to really be deliberate about surfacing, what's on their mind that they might not feel otherwise comfortable sharing. Hypothetical questions. That's your trick. So instead of saying, "Does anyone have any concerns?" you say, "If you had a concern, what would it be?" It allows people to hold it at arm's length and feel more comfortable about sharing a half thought that's the back of their minds. Absolutely gold to get those things out. On inspiration, I love brag and borrow as a small everyday or every week technique in your team, where you say, okay, what's one thing you're really happy about since we last met, and what's one thing that you're concerned about? And just to get into the habit of doing that, brag and borrow. Where would you like to ask for help? It is not always something that people are going to be wanting to say, but if you say, okay, well, what is on your plate that is a challenge, then people are much more likely to surface that. And then for resilience, I would say have the conversation with people about what their body clocks are. Everybody has different peak times. I'm a night owl, really an extreme night owl. Every team where there's been a conversation about how people are at their best and how to, make that fit with their body clocks means that people get more sleep, and as a result, they're more resilient. So that means possibly, if you've got a night owl in your team, moving the team meeting from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. If you've got all early birds, then you think about how do you have a really clear sort of sign-off process at the end of the day. I think if leaders could get a little bit more tuned into where people's body clocks are, there'd be a lot more physical and mental resilience in the teams.
Oh, mic drop. Boom. That was fantastic, Caroline. Wow. I just, so much wisdom in your thoughts and your ideas and your pieces of advice. And I can't thank you enough for spending this time with us and helping to elevate our games. Thank you, Caroline Webb.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
And thank you all the listeners for tuning in to the Seismic Shift podcast. We look forward to seeing you again. Bye, y'all. Thank you for joining us on the Seismic Shift. And before you go, can I ask one favor of you? Do you mind sharing today's episode with a leader you know? The power of this conversation is found in your using it and sharing it to create real connection in your life. Lastly, I'd like to thank Loyola University New Orleans for helping bring this content to life.